Greg, you've hosted over 1,500 hours of audio on X. You host a podcast. You've had a lot of really important and meaningful conversations with thoughtful people. First question to you. What is one of the most important conversations, the most meaningful conversations you've had in the last year?
I've had so many. It's kind of hard. Um, my first thought is to think about all the different spaces I've held, but I wonder if it's something that was offline. Um, Probably one that I had about a month ago with my brother, where we walked through some of our communication differences and how to help align our brotherhood and our friendship so that we don't fight as much. And we had a third party there. It was unintentional, it just kind of happened, but it only took maybe 20 minutes. But that just popped in my head as a really important one because mine and my brother's relationship was pretty good when we were kids. And then when we got into teenage and high school years, he kind of took a different path and we didn't talk for a couple of years. And he was a bit of a black sheep in the family. And now our family's tighter than ever. And me and him are best friends. And we continue to kind of mend and strengthen. I mean, it's mended, but now it's strengthening and trying to really move forward as a unit. So conversations like that are really powerful for me.
That's really cool, man. Are you older brother or younger brother?
I'm 2.5 years older.
Okay. I love to hear that, man. I am a huge believer in the power of conversation. And I love that with all the important, influential people you've talked to, that question brought you right to somebody in your family, somebody very close to you, your brother. And it just reminds me of the healing power and the self-discovery and the relationship building that can be done through proper conversation. And I know that you're older as I am, we're in our 30s, that it takes a lifetime worth of work and paying attention to be able to get to that point where you can have a meaningful conversation where you both walk away feeling closer like that. Very beautiful answer, man. Thank you.
Yeah. He's someone that's really special to me. So like I said, there's been a lot of ups and downs, but at the end of the day, like family is really all you got. So you have to make sure that you keep that really close to you. And even if you, I know a lot of people have issues with their siblings, with their parents, whatever it may be, but you're those are some of the things that you'll probably regret the most if you don't shore those up when they're gone. So
Yeah, sticking with the theme of conversation, when I have this kind of movie director mind where I look over my life as scenes in a movie. Sometimes they're montages, sometimes they're single scenes, and often the most meaningful scenes of that movie are almost always conversations. Sometimes they're recorded like this, but often they're just an intimate conversation with a family member, with a friend, with my children, and there's a magic that can happen when two people are open and really listening to each other and discovering something that can only be discovered through communication. Have you found that for yourself too? When you kind of play the movie of Greg's life, how many of the important monumental moments were having meaningful conversations with somebody?
probably surprisingly fewer, um, because when I think about the meaningful moments in my life, they're more transitional things or like things that I've like attempted, like something that has really been powerful for me over the last 8 years, let's say, since I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast and tried to, I guess, chase entrepreneurship in a sense, what is that I've just tried so many things and failed a lot, frankly, but never been afraid to kind of go all in and move fast and break things, as they say.
Um,
And so when you say like the most, the movie of my life, or the scenes in my life, I think of like the different things that I've tried and how those have manifested, and and what I've taken from those, and me sitting in my apartment alone a lot of times,
yep.
different apartments, maybe three or four that I can think of, by myself at my computer, and what I was feeling and what I was thinking and how I was documenting that in one way or another, more than, ironically, the conversations or the relationships that were a part of those at the time, which I feel like were complementary, and probably in a movie, an actual movie would be the crux of it, because that would be where all the action is and the emotion comes out. But for myself, when I reflect on my journey, I think about all the different like fears and ambitions and attempts that I made, and how I attacked those, and how my mind was working at those different times, and what I thought was important. And I guess it's selfish, but it's my movie. So I think about me and how I was feeling in those moments.
Yeah, that's a great point. It brings up two questions for me. One is there probably is a conversation going on in those moments of you sitting alone in your apartment, and it's with yourself. So it triggers me to
Mm.
ask, what is how do your internal conversations go? How is Greg talking with Greg inside of his own mind on a day-to-day basis?
So one of the things that I've come to find, having tried all these things that I've referred to, some days you feel like you're a king, and you feel like you've got this in the bag, and nobody sees how great I am. But I'm a lock. Like, look at all these things I have going for me. I have this project. Oh my God, once I get this going. And literally later that afternoon, you're like, what am I doing? Like, there's no way this is going to work. Um, you know, you're comparing yourself. That's probably one of my biggest weaknesses. I compare myself to people a lot. Um, so for me, the conversation in my mind is mostly an analysis of those thoughts. So I am a watcher of my thoughts, and I'm mostly saying, oh, that's interesting that you think that. Where's that coming from? And that separation is what keeps me sane and keeps me focused and keeps me moving forward, where it's like, hey, this kind of feels like doesn't have that much upside today, but this is the path I'm on. This is the project I'm working on. These are the people I'm working with. We push forward until your energy is telling you, no, no, it's over. And I'm a big believer in following your energy and not being afraid to pivot. But when you're committed to something in the moment of that particular ambition or journey or attempt, is a time when your feelings are going to fluctuate in regards to how you feel about yourself and how you feel about your positioning and your momentum, and you have to be able to look at those and appreciate them, but also in a sense dismiss them for better or for worse. And so much of the conversation in my head is more of a meta analysis of what I'm thinking versus really like um, being identified with the thoughts themselves.
Beautiful, dude. I was thinking that throughout is the meta-analysis. You took the words right out of my mouth, man. Is instead of being completely lost in that conversation, like probably most people are, particularly in the West, all the damn time, is they believe that they're both sides of the conversation. They're the one that's criticizing, the one that's excited, and you can get so wrapped up in that. And if you don't keep a little bit of a distance from that mental conversation, as you're saying, you're the watcher of those thoughts. There's a meta analysis of this dialogue that's going on in between your brain of the brave, king Greg that thinks he's going to take over the world, and then the one that's got all sorts of doubts and fears about it. I love to hear this is right up the Laughing Stoic Buddha brand, is that you're backing away and observing that as much as possible. We're not monks. We're not fucking, transcended masters. We're going to get lost in it from time to time. but as long as you have a practice of stepping back and analyzing that. And then I love too that you said following your energy. That's something I've heard you say. I've seen you on the timeline talking about that, and that's something that I'm in my journey starting to really lean into more, is following that energy. So that leads to my second question that you triggered it inside my mind. When was the last time that you really felt your energy shift in a whole new novel direction? We'll say it was very focused on a certain task, and then all of a sudden you had that aha, that epiphany, and the energy shifted, and you decided to trust and follow that new energy.
Yeah, it's happening right now. I'm kind of going through one. And they probably happen every 6 months or something like that at this point because I'm moving so fast. And that's partly to do with X and the way that um, not just the platform operates, but also committed creators find that the self-development journey by going through the daily posting and the feedback and all that, if you pay attention to those feedback loops, you evolve very quickly. So right now I'm going through one where I have basically put a pause on my podcast. I did episode 30, or I released episode 30 on the 28th of December, right at the end of the year. And I had found for about the last month of that I wasn't enjoying the process like I had in the beginning. And there was the resistance to doing the research, to doing the recording and the editing. Well, I have an editor, but there is some post production stuff that I have to do, and I just didn't want to do it. And I also didn't feel like I was really getting a lot of the ROI that I had gotten in the beginning, where I was establishing myself as a consistent, high quality conversationalist. I feel like I had gotten a lot of that out of the way. Like I had gotten over that. You get that Pareto principle, like kind of the
80/20.
80%.
Yeah.
And when you're not having fun, you don't feel like there's a lot of upside, and it's costing you a few $1,000s a month. You're just like, I'm gonna shift. And right now I'm moving out. And I had also gone on a bit of a, I don't want to, well, I was still creating every day, but I had been doing a lot less spaces in November and December. I was kind of traveling throughout Florida for a couple of months. And I had gone so hard from March to October, basically just my head down, like nonstop, alone every day in Arizona, just grinding. And I took the last couple months and I was visiting family and friends and going on some dates and just like enjoying my life a little bit. And I was creating every day on X, but I wasn't really hosting spaces that much, which has obviously become one of the major lifebloods of my brand. So at the end of the year here, when I came back home to Arizona, I decided, look, we're going to put the podcast on pause and we're going to focus more on spaces again and on monetization. So I relaunched Louder Spaces yesterday, and that's going to be a big focus of mine as well. And then I've been doing the pop-ups again, which I hadn't been doing. Um, I'm experimenting with live streaming as well, which kind of came out of nowhere this week, and I'm having fun with those. So basically, live content, and then building out products. So I'm working on a Spaces seminar, which the product's pretty much done, but I'm working on a landing page and getting my affiliates in order. And I need to establish myself again through Louder Spaces, I think, and before I start promoting the seminar and like, hey, if you like what we're doing here, I can teach you how to do this kind of vibe. So it's basically Spaces and live and doing monetization. And then there's some other monetization plans further down the road, which are always subject to change. But that's been the big shift for me, is kind of moving off the podcast as much and making sure I get back into spaces and then starting to monetize more.
I love to hear that, dude. And what it makes me think of is you mentioned that you've tried a lot of things chasing the entrepreneurial dream, right? Moving out here to the West. And like you said, the energy may shift for you every 6 months, but every time that that energy or direction shifts, you have this foundation of all the work you've done up to this point. So I'm thinking about the fact that you've done 30 podcasts, but there was so much work done before that that prepared you to be the podcaster that you are, that Louder is. And I was going to lead with this. You've watching your podcast has helped me maybe more than any other podcast that I've watched to
Mm,
change my own hosting style.
mm.
So I've noticed I do a lot of the things that you talk about podcasters doing that annoy the hell out of you, and I never would have noticed it. It was right in front of my face until you brought it up. So I normally open with, "Welcome to the podcast," and a little bit of this and that, and a little bit of foreplay and all this kind of stuff. And I've seen, God, what is it about Greg's podcast that just hit from the first moment, right? And they build, and there's no like wasted space. And I go, "Oh, I'm doing all the things he's talking about not doing." So what I had considered doing was opening up the podcast and saying, "Greg, tell me a little bit about your story just to make you laugh."
Yeah. It's been
'Cause
funny because the last like 3 or 4 podcasts I've been on, people have been very intentional about not doing that.
yeah, bro.
And I'm curious,
You're making us step
how
our
have you
game up.
found that for you in terms of getting things going right away when you start shows? Has that made an impact for you as a host?
Absolutely, I feel it on an energetic level. I felt it just now to get meta. Talking with you is I was like, "Oh, we're in it." Instead of tiptoeing, we're right in the water and the energy's there, right, from the first moment. And I wanted to really get to a point where I could even address it. And so I could say to you, um, I've been nervous about this podcast because this is the first time I feel that I have a guest that's a quality podcast host. Now, I had Duncan Trussell on here, and he's one of my all-time favorite podcasters, but he's a hippie, like, creative guy. He's not super intentional about the craft of podcasting, and I see that you are. You take it very seriously. And I just wanted to thank you for being that example and helping me to really step my podcast game up too.
I appreciate you, man. And, that's great to hear. I also feel at the same time that I'm kind of like, I just don't see myself as a great podcaster. I see myself as someone who just prepares a lot for things.
Yeah.
And I have a very like like I take a lot of pride in my work and I'm very detail oriented. And so basically anything that I put my mind to, I just it doesn't make it excellent, but I make sure that it's like above average all the time. And then some things, if there's natural tendencies, they become a little bit better than that. If there's some like, just built in talent on top of the hard work or the attention to detail. But, I it's funny because before I started the podcast, or like right around when I started in like May of 23, I was doing these like manifestation meditations and I was manifesting the life I wanted, quote unquote. And the one thing that I was really focused on was seeing myself in front of this boom arm with a microphone in front of me in different locations around the world interviewing people. And that has kind of faded a little bit as far as how I envision things going. Now, that's not to say I'm never going to podcast again. I almost think that's certainly not the case. But I have like, when I think of the great podcasters, they're people they start and then they just go. And that's just their thing forever, seems. All the best ones. And I can't see you stopping. Like, I just see, you love this.
Yes.
And you look at like Danny Miranda or Joe Rogan or Lex, or like Chris Williamson is the guy that from Modern Wisdom that I basically took a lot of inspiration from, as far as the starting the podcast right away with a question off a rip. Like, he just had that intro where it just goes like with like a cloud, and then it's just he's asking a question in a split screen. And I
Yeah.
basically took that from him. So all these guys, it's like they go and they don't stop. And for me, it's been like I did it and I thought I loved it. And then it might have been because the format I got burnt out. Um, or maybe I was getting a little too tied to the numbers or whatever it was. But I almost like don't identify as a podcaster anymore, just because I feel like it would be doing a disservice to all the great ones and the people who are like super passionate about it. So yeah, I appreciate you saying all that, and I really admire your show. I've watched a bunch of them, and you have a real talent. So I'm really proud of you, and to hear you say that I had any influence on anything you're doing.
Right on, man. That means a lot. And there's an interesting difference there between us. Maybe we could dive into it a little bit. I am like, if there's two identities I could say I'm proud of in my creative life, it's a writer and a podcaster. And I really can't ever imagine myself not doing this anymore. And I'm not attached to the outcome as far as numbers and all this. Is something we talked about on a space maybe just last week, that I really only have one intention when I come in to do a podcast, and it's give the guest a good experience. Have them walk away going, Nick's a cool dude. That was a cool conversation. I learned something about myself. I learned something about life or whatever. And I walked away with a good experience. And with that very basic sort of goal, as you can see, I'm not super produced. I'm not the best at marketing this or getting it out there, all that, but I would do it for free forever. And I'm sort of slowly, hopefully going to improve the tactical side of things as far as, getting a little bit better quality with my interviewing style, with my production, with my marketing and all that, because again, the only goal is to just get cooler people to talk to. Like my one of my dreams, like my vision board dreams, is just a podcast with all the bad motherfuckers I want to podcast with. I'm sure you've heard me say before. Podcasting with Duncan is like top 3 all time. It's up there with the birth of my daughter and like amazing shit that I got to podcast with. It's an absolute dream come true. I feel like my life's a simulation that it happened. And I also don't want to stop there. I want a podcast with Lex Friedman. I want a podcast with Jordan Peterson. Even like I have this huge, I think I may have mentioned this to you before on a call we had. I have this two huge audacious goals in my life. And one is to get on Joe Rogan, and the other is to publish a best-selling book. And so again, on the idea of following my energy, I'll never run out of the resource of that energy to pursue those two goals. And if it takes a million, 1,000 podcasts to get there, I'll be happy every moment of the way, as happy as I am in this moment talking to you, right? So, not to make it about me, I want to direct that similar question to you. What in your life do you feel an insane amount of sustainable energy towards pursuing as an end goal?
Family. Uh, and maybe it's a step by step thing, and maybe it's just where I'm at in my life, but finding like the perfect wife is something that I think about a lot. Um, I'm somebody who, first of all, my parents are still together. They just celebrated their 44th anniversary in August, and they're wonderful. And I have always had little girlfriends when I was in kindergarten or preschool and elementary school. I had my first serious girlfriend when I was 15. We were together for 4 years. As soon as we broke up, I started talking to a girl about 5 days later who ended up being my girlfriend for 7 years. We lived together for 3.5 years. As soon as we broke up, I started talking to another girl within a very short period of time. We dated for 2 years, lived together for one. And so it was about 13 or so years of relationships in from the age of like 15 to 28 or something like that. And that's when I moved out to LA, and I was single for the first time and started working on all these projects and things like that, and finding myself and really like pouring into myself and figuring out who I was and what value I brought. And I've had some girlfriends since then that weren't as, I was clearer on what I wanted, I think. Still had some stuff to figure out, but I never really saw anyone that I thought was like going to be my wife. So I'm still kind of like in that process, but I also don't feel like I'm at the point where I'm going to attract the woman that I'll end up being my wife. I think I'm getting close. I think I'm getting pretty close, but there is a hierarchy that men have to move up. And the reality is that men run the race to go up the ladder, and women are waiting at the finish line. And that's just how the game works in the sexual marketplace. So for myself, I think about, that is the thing that keeps me going, is like, if I can find an amazing partner, then everything kind of opens up from there in terms of living the most fulfilled life possible. Like, I think when people say like, what's the meaning of life? It's like, I think that's impossible to answer. But what I do know is that everything that we do seems to tie back to having a better experience. That's really the so instead of what's the meaning of life, I kind of ask myself the question like how should one optimize their life, right? And to me it's experience, and part of the experience is building a family unit and creating little beings that go on and carry your last name and your bloodline and fulfill the duty of yourself as a man and as a creator and a procreator and and a human essentially. Um, so I think I'm coming into my manhood that will hopefully lead towards what I've always envisioned. When I was young, I remember very vividly as a teenager thinking like my entire purpose on this planet is to be a father. And I think I lost that for a little bit. And I don't even know if I'm all the way back there because I'm still so focused on the woman part of it. But I think ultimately that leads
Step by
back
step.
to, yeah, to the fatherhood. Um, Dickie Bush said to me on my podcast, I asked him about dating as an entrepreneur and how he thinks about that because he's so busy all the time and how does he approach it. And he said that every step that he takes and every decision he makes with his business and with his life is in alignment with trying to be a world-class father.
Yeah.
That's his ultimate goal and vision. And I felt that. So
Yeah.
um, the sustainability that you ask, like my career and the things that I do on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis seem to fluctuate quite a bit as I find my path and I find what's sustainable from a business sense. But what's the underlying sustainability for me that keeps me going and keeps me driven is finding a wife and building a family.
That's a beautiful answer, dude. I wrote down become a world-class father in my notes before this because I wanted to talk to you about that. And it's
Mm,
cool that it organically came up. The
mm,
first time you said that, I, I I really I felt deeply connected. I was like, oh, okay. For whatever surface talk you and I talk about, I feel like your values are really aligned, similar to my values. And when I heard you say that, I go, oh, that's why. Even though you're not a father, like I'm in the same place. So I have two daughters. I had my first daughter when I was 24. And they are, like I mentioned, these huge, audacious, creative goals. The why behind those, the book that I want to write, is to my daughters. The
mm.
everything that I write, my newsletter, is all letters to my daughters. And I have this huge thing. You may have heard me talk about it before about my mortality. I feel that I could just die at any point, and I I meditate on being on my deathbed, and the idea of not having writings to be able to hand to my daughters that could outlive me terrifies me. So I write always in the mind of tomorrow's not promised. I need to have some written words down. And I feel like that's way more powerful than podcasts and videos, anything else. The amount of attention that it takes to craft a message on paper to hand to somebody else, I think is the most meaningful thing that you can do. So that is the why behind it. Like a best-selling book, like just as a guy, to maybe make some money and buy cooler cars, does nothing for me. But a book that is written to the two most important people in my life, is the real drive of that energy behind it. So I love to hear that, dude. That you really are locked in on. We're totally aligned there, dude. To me, being a man is really about the children ultimately, whether or not you even have the partner, and you are taking it one step at a time, making yourself a world-class man to get your dream partner to be a world-class father. And I feel like, for whatever my intuition is worth, I feel like it's inevitable, dude. I think you're gonna get it.
You know what's crazy you say that is I agree with you. It's one of the things that for as, you know, proud of myself and bullish as I am on myself from my career standpoint and just the trajectory that I'm going, despite a lot of headwinds and people second guessing me and second guessing myself and failing and all that stuff. I'm pretty confident in myself, but there's always like I do deal with um you know a scarcity mindset around money and things like that, and I'm working through that. So I'm 90% confident or 85% confident. But when it comes to love and attracting somebody, I've just always like it's never been a question for me. Like I'm like it's going to happen because I have had like throughout my life I've been able to like meet people and connect with people and just for as much, nonsense as I talk on the timeline or in spaces, um I'm a pretty like sensitive emotional guy
Yeah.
and I love one-on-one. I'm very introverted despite, speaking loud on a space or whatever that may be. Um, and so I just love connecting with people and I love connecting with women. I think it's like one of the great joys in my life is to like sit down and talk to a girl for 10 hours. Do you know what I mean? So,
I'm the same, bro. Yes.
yeah. So I
Yeah,
love
that's
that. Like I've always been very confident that that will come. And I just need to be prepared for when that person enters my vicinity that I have the resources and the capacity to provide at the level that she is looking for.
yeah. Yeah, this is again Jordan Peterson 101. Everybody asks, "How do I find the right partner?" And he goes, "You have the question asked backwards. How do I become the kind of person that the right
100%.
partner will come into my life?" And you seem to
100%.
be 100% locked onto that. It's really
Yeah.
cool, man. Okay, so I need to get into my usual laughing stoic Buddha questions, but first I'm gonna hit you with dealer's choice. Two controversial subjects here, okay? And I'll let you choose which one you want to talk about. Subject number one is milk.
Mhm.
Say your opinions on milk. Or number two is cults. These are two very divisive, difficult,
Divisive. I
divisive.
think I
There it is.
think I knew you were gonna say cults. Um and I think that's a more interesting topic. Let's go that way.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about, I mean, you know my history and people that watch this podcast regularly have heard me mention it. What is your take on cults and how they apply to personal brands and X?
Yeah. So I will preface this by saying that my views on this continue to evolve and I'm not super well read on it. This is all just kind of novel experimentation from a branding standpoint and from an education standpoint. This basically entered my psychology when I met Atlas on X and had him on my podcast. And I had brought up the idea of cults within Louder randomly, like a week before I had a podcast with him. I was like, oh, this is like a cult, like ha ha ha. I don't know where it came from within me. And then on my podcast, when I had him on, he brought it up and he started talking about how your brand should be a cult. Basically, you should be building a cult around you. And that was very intriguing to me because he comes at it with a sense of, well, not only from a he's not only done it in understands it in principle, but he's done it in practice. So most people don't know this, but Alice and Ego actually built a cult on Twitter in like 2020 or 2021. And there were a lot of big creators that were in that cult, like J.K. Molina and Art of Purpose and Savior Sons, and there were a couple others, I think. They were literally members of this cult and it was to the point where they had like indoctrinations, they had a 50-page manifesto, they had all of this stuff, and it was like if you don't get 100 followers a day you get shamed. Like there was all this stuff that they had, and they had you work your way up the ladder there, and there was like, and I didn't realize this at first, what attracted this, what attracted the way he spoke about it in theory to me was that to build a really strong personal brand is to have people that align with an ideology, whereas like a community might be a shared interest and a cult has a shared ideology. And of course, as you know, there is a dangerous side to that sort of rhetoric where you think about, because another one of the things is a charismatic leader, right? Is something that's necessary because people don't follow ideas, they follow people that embody the ideas that they
Mhm.
believe in or are attracted to. And so to have a true cult, you need a charismatic leader that embodies the idea and is willing to lead you into war to defend that idea, particularly as a minority thought process going up against the status quo. So that, of course, can lead to the more famous or infamous cult, organizational structures where you have, the guys who are manipulating and abusing their power and their influence within their cult. Um, and what I tried to do for about a month when I was playing around with that term is try to recapture the meaning of it such that it didn't have to mean manipulation and sexual abuse and we all drink poison and die. It can just mean that we all believe something different than what the mainstream believes. In particular, with us, it was around like audio and communication on X and elsewhere, that having conversations and creating audio content and using spaces are kind of like a really powerful way to get our voice out and to build community. And we had experienced that all together, and everyone was on board with that. And so if I could be this charismatic leader that was embodying the social audio revolution, and we could all get behind that and build each other up, well, now we're taking back the meaning of the word. And I looked into it a little bit, and there is a little bit of conversation and different papers from um, different scientists and researchers that they have different definitions of the word and what does it actually mean. Is it can, and some of them to say that it's just some sort of social movement. Like it, you have things like cult classic movies where it's like no one's judging that cult. It's just people that revolve around the ideas in a movie. And even the etymology of the word is like humans are culture, right? And doing it for the culture and following the culture is not negatively looked upon either. So where do we draw the line? And it seems that's up for grabs, even though maybe the minority of the professionals are towards the more like general social, and more of it is more towards the like traditional definition of it or what people may think of it. I played around with this idea that like we could build a cult that had good in mind and was supportive of one another. I didn't go all the way with it because it turns out it does involve, if you want to build a proper cult, you do have to have some of those like those that structural hierarchies and things like that within it, that feels a little bit off to me. But from a branding standpoint, it was a little bit provocative and it got people talking on Money X about cults and talking about me, maybe if it was even in a negative light. I thought it made people think. And what it really did, Nick, was it helped me double down on this idea that I don't just have to talk about audio and spaces. I can talk about like more broad ideas, and that the goal of my brand is to make people think and to
Yeah.
make people feel and to be a vehicle for that. And then all the other stuff kind of just falls into place, particularly if I'm executing those conversations in an audio format. I can still hold on to my like social audio brand positioning, but I can talk about anything I want. And cults was like really the first thing that I started talking about that and thinking about out loud that made me realize that and brought on the different type of attention.
That's really cool, man. Yeah. So I saw that pivot. I don't know if it maybe called a soft pivot because there's still the main goal of audio as sort of your North Star. But I was involved in that, you going away from, we'll say, entrepreneurship and brand building into more social ideas. And it was really, as you know, I wrote a post about this. I've talked about it on the podcast. It was cool for me to reconsider, with given my own past, having grown up in a cult myself, reconsider what my own ideas about it, and hearing very articulate people such as yourself, Atlas, Ego. I watched the podcast you had with Atlas. I would join some spaces and discuss the thoughts with you guys, and it was so cool to have this word that had all this baggage and was somewhat triggering for me. I'd work through it somewhat, for me to like actually flip it on his head and find empowerment in that word too. This is something I've talked with you about. What I've seen in the cult that I grew up in and the other cults that I've studied is this sort of idea that we know something, or we have something, or we understand something's more important than everybody else does. And we're special. It's like an extreme version of a club, right? And for the first time, I always saw the negative side of that, of how that was used for manipulation and to isolate people from the rest of the world. And for the first time, I was considering you can actually use that for something positive. In your case, we understand that audio, people are undervaluing the importance and the potential of audio media. And it kind of feels cool to know something that everybody else doesn't, to be ahead of the curve, right? And to be all around that similar ideology. And that ideology is embodied in one guy, in this case, you, very small, loose knit cult. But I was like, for the first time, going, oh, this is a cool way to reframe my ideas of cultship. And it like digs in deep to my own psychology of like, I've always been afraid to lean too much into any particular leader or believe too much in them. And I've always kind of negotiating that of like keeping my own identity and my own values, but also like seeing a bad motherfucker who's leading and who's succeeding and being okay with following them, striking that balance. And so that whole experience, the fact that it started with something that's near and dear to my heart, cults, of watching you discuss that in real time with very thoughtful, articulate people, has been really cool for me. And I like this pivot, this soft pivot that you're doing more towards social issues. And you just had a space yesterday, yesterday, on marriage. And it's really cool to hear. And again, this is something that's very much aligned. We're like connected psychically or something, dude, on an energy level, because it's something I'm
Definitely.
literally going through at this exact time. And so it's like the you're able to help people in such a different way when you talk about these bigger human social issues than narrowly focus on just like, here's how you make a little bit more money, here's how you monetize, here's how you get more followers. Now, on that purpose, another thing that I hear you talking about a lot, which is really interesting to me, is you talk about the importance of influence. And I think influence is one of those gateways sort of between the two. That's something Atlas is very articulate on also. Um, Talk to me about what you think the importance of influence on a social level and personal level, and the bridge of building influence to being a successful entrepreneur and personal brand.
Yeah. So the biggest, the way I think about it is that the world is heading more and more digital. We all know this. And the most powerful way, again, to optimize for experience, as we talked about, is to basically have a personal brand that you can go into the digital world and say, here's what I think, and here's what I'm selling. And now the value comes back to me, and now I can do whatever I want, right? Is to have that like financial freedom, the time freedom, the location freedom, all those things that we optimize for. And that comes from influence. There's a reason. I mean, the whole term influencer, there's a purpose in that. That word wasn't chosen accidentally, right? I mean, it means something, and it's frankly very new. So I was part of the Vine explosion in 2013. I was very deep in that game. I had about 25,000 followers on Vine in 2013, and I watched the first. Those were the first individual content creators getting paid by brands to promote products. So of course you had like celebrity endorsements and things like that on commercials or whatever it may be, but it was the first time that someone could get on a social media platform and a brand would go and say, here's $500 to promote our energy drink or whatever it was. Now Vine of course died off because they made a lot of mistakes in how they treated their creators, and Twitter couldn't afford it. It was owned by Twitter and they shut it down and all this stuff. But most of those creators a lot of them went over to YouTube, which created the influencer culture as we know it now. Like the David Dobrik's of the world, like came from Vine and moved over to YouTube. So the influencer was born just about 10 years ago, man. And of course, we've had, evolutions in all these social medias, and we've had introductions of new ones with TikTok and things of that nature. But influence is something that everybody, whether they admit it or not, they crave it on some level. So you can talk about a personal brand influence, whether you're trying to monetize and create a certain type of lifestyle, or like you mentioned, there's a social influence as well, where even just the minor idea of like think about, you might probably have different groups of friends. Maybe you have your high school friends or your college friends or your wife's friends, and there's different groups of people that you associate with, even your family, your extended family. And in some conversations, you walk in the room and it's like you are the center of it all, and you're the smartest or you're the most entertaining, and people look to you. And there are some where it's like you wish you could just be heard a little bit more. And there's like a lack of influence almost. And I think we've all felt like different ends of that. And so there is this social element to it as well, on a personal standpoint, um, where we all crave that, and we want to be heard, we want to be felt, we want to be understood, we want to be respected, and all of that falls under influence. If you can obtain influence, it assumes that all of those other things are in place. So it's this culmination of these like social and biological needs that we have to be part of the group. And it's proof positive that you have succeeded in ascending some sort of influence hierarchy or some sort of acceptance hierarchy. And
Yeah.
you have gone from just being noticed to listened to and respected, all the way up to the point where you could potentially monetize that respect and attention. And so building influence across the board in your life is incredibly important, regardless of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's so well said, dude. Very, very articulate. I'm thinking of just like the basic human need of being seen, right? Feeling like you're not alone in the world, right? And then you can just build up that ladder from there. You're seen, you're noticed, you're able to capture attention, right? You're able to be compelling once you have the attention, and you're able to leave some sort of an impact on the person. That this is sort of my little niche on X is storytelling. The whole idea of uh, grabbing attention. Since I've been studying copywriting, it's funny you're talking about how it helps in social media and your personal life and your work life, everything. Like I've studied copywriting and hooks for the last couple of months, and I've noticed in my job when I'm talking to my boss or my colleagues or whoever, I'm thinking of like I got to hook their attention first. I can't be boring with this fucking story, right? I have to have some sort of a call to action at the end, and the reframing, because I've been writing so much copy, reframing that in my normal conversations has been like transform my personal life outside of my writing and my personal brand and everything else. So to that point, I would like to hear how you particularly are your thoughts on building influence as it pertains to audio, as it pertains to your niche.
Yeah. Well, I guess just for anyone who's not familiar with me, like I have this um this connection to audio because of this natural inclination and draw that I had to it when I was living in Los Angeles in 2016 is when I moved there, and I was using these dating apps and I was trying to meet people, and it was going okay, but it was very difficult to like write compelling texts for flirting and for charisma and romance. And it just really outlined this idea. One day at dinner, I went out with a friend in late 2017, and we were talking about the apps, and this idea came up around like there needs to be like multimedia somehow involved in the connection process. Like these apps are completely leaving us, like just throwing us to the wolves by saying, okay, you've agreed that each other are good looking, you've swiped right on each other, and now like here's a blank text box, good luck. And it's like, how are we, like you're basically just like not you're leaving us high and dry. So I was like, I want to fix that. And that day I was like, and I told her at dinner, I was like, I'm doing this. She's like, oh, I know you are. Like, and within, so 3 weeks, so for at first it was like the idea was video, and I wanted to bring video to the apps. And this is before there were any video dating apps. This is again December 2017. And within 3 weeks of researching, I realized that audio was actually a much more efficient, effective way to bond people over the internet. And I started building out a prototype for that, and I'll save the whole long story. But within about a year and a half, I had built a team and had a web application that was running these live audio dating experiences in Los Angeles. And they were speed dating. So you would meet 5 people in a 30-minute window in audio only rooms. And after each of your calls, you would see their picture and decide if you want to match. So you were connecting based on your conversation only, the words that you were speaking, and people loved it. Despite the app itself being quite primitive and buggy, the actual novelty and vehicle by which people were being connected and introduced was very appealing. And we saw that in the reviews that we were getting from our beta testers. And I decided to, after a while, stop working on it because I hit some, it started to get difficult to obtain users with no budget. And instead of, that's always gonna happen with a project, especially with one that, if that were to work, it would have been very big. And so of course you're going to hit those hurdles. And those are the times when you question, like, is this really what I want? And how do I get it? And I decided I didn't really want to be a tech entrepreneur. I didn't want to raise millions of dollars of VC. I didn't want to manage teams of engineers. I didn't want to be on the cover of Forbes or something like that, or go have an IPO. And so I put that to bed, but I never fell out of love with people connecting using audio. I knew it was the right way to do it. And I tried to work with a few other dating apps I saw popping up. I kept my ear to the ground in the dating app scene. And no one, and still to this day, no one has really done it. And I still have a vision for that. But Clubhouse came out in 2020, and I was like, finally, there's an app that people can go on and connect by just speaking to each other. And I went all in on that, and I spoke on that towards the end of 2020 and then all through 2021. And I started to build up a brand there because it was during the crypto bull market, and I had gotten into crypto in the previous cycle in 2017. And so I knew a little bit about what was going on, and I was talking and helping onboard new people, and ended up talking about this one token a lot, and got invited to do a Twitter space, which came out in 2021, but I got invited in 2022 to do a Twitter space, which was basically a clone of Clubhouse. And that's when my Twitter journey began in February 2022. And I kind of went away from the spaces and the Clubhouse stuff. And I went in, well, I never really was in the spaces. I went away from Clubhouse and focused more on writing on Twitter. And I was writing a lot of threads, and it was all about crypto. And so I kind of didn't really have a lot of audio going on. But then if you fast forward about a year after that, I had gotten pretty successful in the crypto niche, but I was bored, and I pivoted into more like mindfulness and just personal growth and things that I was actually thinking about. And then as I started to go viral there, I started talking about Twitter growth, getting a little meta with it, like, here's how I'm growing. And then through that, I started realizing I'm spending a lot of time in spaces now, growing and meeting people and building my network. And I pivoted my entire brand. I had this like epiphany moment, like, you still love audio, dude, and you're using it every day in these spaces now. Why don't you just be the spaces or the social audio guy again? And my brand, we launched Louder Spaces right at the same time as I switched. And that was just kind of, that took off starting last July, in July 23. So that's a really long way to get to your question, which is around like why I think it's so important. And it's like, I've had this long history of understanding the power of connecting people without having a video in front, because the video adds pressure to both sides, and it adds commitment to both sides in terms of sitting there watching, being attentive and not rude. What do you look like? Where are you? All these things that with audio, you have so much more flexibility. And there's actually science, which I know you've heard me talk about, that backs up that voice only communication elicits higher rates of empathic accuracy than multi-sense communication. So you understand people better by just hearing their voice and zoning in on the words that they choose and the way that they say them, than by having the slight distractions of body language, of facial expressions and things of that nature. And so I've gone all in on spaces. I've been able to grow my brand by creating educational and entertaining audio environments and audio experiences on the X app. And I've also helped other people build their own brands up, because you humanize yourself very quickly as opposed to just writing tweets. And I think writing tweets is really important and people aren't going to follow you unless you're putting stuff on the timeline. But the best top of funnel that we have right now on X is Spaces. By getting out in front of big audiences and them hearing you and connecting with you as a person and your energy, than it is them seeing you on their timeline. You can still get followers that way, but they're following you for your content. And when they follow you from a space or from hearing you on a podcast or whatever that audio format is, they're following you for you. And I think that's really, really powerful.
Yeah, two personal anecdotes here. One, 99% of the meaningful relationships that I've made on X have been in spaces. It's
Same.
been having conversations, hearing somebody else's voice, them hearing mine. The intimacy beyond text on a timeline is just astronomical. It's incomparable. Also, this is something I'm going to give you one more compliment in a way that hearing your information has changed my life. I noticed with my girlfriend, she doesn't speak English as a first language, that like you were talking about, when you're looking at each other, there's all these other you're reading each other's faces, there's all this other information that you're sort of downloading at the same time. It's hard to focus on the words, and the fact that we already have a language barrier takes even more attention than usual. So I sort of intuitively noticed, and then I heard you talk about it and I started leaning into it, that we have better conversations on the phone than face to face. And it's, I think, because of exactly that, because the only thing we're focused on is each other's voices and the words, and you're able to connect and feel at a deeper level as opposed to all the stimulus of being face to face. And the other day, we were having a little bit of a misunderstanding, and I thought of you, and I thought, babe, close your eyes. I'm going to close my eyes, and we're just going to talk without looking at each other.
You were in the
And
same room.
we're in the same room. We're sitting on the couch, this couch, across from each other,
That's
and
beautiful.
yeah, dude, we closed our eyes, and it was fucking magic. This
Wow.
exact thing we were trying to explain with hand gestures and with eye, movements and face stuff was instantly understood the moment we closed our eyes and talked for 30 seconds. And I
That's
was like,
so cool.
yeah, I'm considering writing about it because it was
You
such a powerful
absolutely
experience.
should.
Yeah.
And part of it is you remove judgment from
Mm,
yourself and from the other person. So like if you're trying to say something, you're like, maybe judgment isn't the perfect word, but you're trying to use your body or your face or your whatever you're doing to express yourself. And so
mhm.
you're sometimes you lose the energy or the
Yeah.
exact tonality, and you overemphasize or you get caught up in other things because like you say there's all these additional kind of downloadable or uploadable depending on. And when they're talking you're kind of like, when she said that, like, is she angry, is she disappointed, you're like trying to figure out from watching her face or watching her language, body language. Whereas like if it's just the words, and can we remove all of the other inputs
Mm.
and just hear what we're trying to say and isolate that. I think that's amazing. I've never heard anybody act that out in real life. That's super cool, man.
Yeah, right on, man. It just came to me intuitively in the moment, and it was magical. Obviously, speaking is whatever. We're used to speaking and not seeing our face. It was listening, and
Mm,
listening in her voice, like you said, the things you're trying to read with facial expressions, all of those attitudes or moods or energies can be felt within the voice itself. And it was
mhm.
like I was instantly locked in to the exact feeling behind what she was trying to communicate. It was really fucking cool. So I'll encourage you to maybe try the same thing, man. Next time we have an argument with
Dude,
a
it's
girl.
amazing. That's really, really cool. And I just always think back to when I was creating the app and I just had this like, it wasn't just a frustration, it was more of a like I was in awe, or I was like I thought it was blasphemous that like nobody could see what I was seeing.
How's everyone missing this?
It was so obvious because what I was noticing, bro, was everyone was creating two different types of apps. They were trying to innovate in the dating space. And notice how nobody's broken through. It's been Tinder and Bumble and Hinge a little bit. But that Hinge was out at that point as well. So I was right that all of these the apps that were coming out, and there were a lot of them. You just haven't heard of them because none of them worked. I
Mhm.
was I was literally looking at them every day and every week coming out, and they were trying to innovate in two different ways. One was putting people in different situations based on interest. So the Tinder for dog lovers, the Tinder
Mhm.
for Christians, the Tinder for whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like that was never the problem. People, there's cool people on every app. Like that's not the issue. And then the other way they were trying to solve it was going straight to video apps and trying all these different creative ways to use video to connect people. So one was trying to solve the organization and the curation of people, and one was trying to solve the communication between people. And I believe the communication breakdown of the text box is the problem. So this side was totally missing the ball, and this
Yeah.
side was on the right. They had identified the correct problem, but their solution was insufficient through
Very well
video,
put.
and nobody was building audio, and I just couldn't understand why no one was seeing it. And I still believe, and I'm going to keep putting this out there, is that there is an opportunity to build, even if it's not a dating app, some sort of interest level app, whether it's networking and business as well as romance, where you push people down the funnel from these larger audio rooms where it's a group audio environment. And Clubhouse kind of cracked the code on that, which is why I'm so disappointed in them, because they've not only did they drop the ball with the way that they handled their initial iteration, which was the big breakthrough, but then they've pivoted and done this whole other like they've rebuilt their entire experience around a whole different way of groups to interact through audio. And it's like that was never, you solved group audio interaction. And we're seeing
Mhm.
that with spaces. The real opportunity is to help people now funnel these group audio conversations down into 2-person, 3-person, 4-person groups
Yes.
that were already filtered out by, hey, we're all in this room about personal brand. There's 300 of us in there. How can we break out into smaller groups? How can we break out into one-on-ones? How can we push people down the relationship funnel, make networking more powerful between smaller groups of people? And whether so there's an opportunity, but I also think there's a huge opportunity for um, literally this is a multi-million dollar overnight opportunity,
Yeah.
is for the show Love is Blind on Netflix to
Mhm.
literally just create a fucking dating app, because that was the idea. They
Uh-huh.
came out a couple years after my app idea, and I don't think they copied me. Obviously they had no idea what I was doing, but I saw that show and I was like, oh, people meeting through just listening to each other's voices and falling in love from voice, and then having a reveal after and going on happily ever after or whatever. And it's like, imagine if this show, which is still going to this day on Netflix, I don't know how many seasons they're in now, if at the bottom of every episode just said download the Love is Blind app,
Yeah.
and people just went on there and started fucking dating via audio experience. And it's like they would make so much fucking money, because dating is, people are willing to spend on this. It's a
Mhm.
massively lucrative opportunity, and there's been no innovation. There's been no disruption and new players. It's like Tinder is ripe for disruption, and
Mhm.
especially when you go up the curve with like people in their 40s and 50s, they have money and they are just dying for to find people, and they're all used to using the phones. You know, everyone on their landline back in the day under the covers with
Yeah,
your
bro.
crush. Like
It's a
we've all
fucking
been
gold
there.
mine. Yes.
It's so I'm just gonna keep putting that out there. Maybe Love is Blind will reach out to me.
Dude, it
I'll
is
tell them what I know, but yeah,
it's a gold mine for Love is Blind, dude. They need to pay you like $1 million in consulting
they don't
because
need to pay me shit. They just literally just do the damn thing. Like I gave you the sauce. Just do
yeah,
it. Just start experimenting. Because
yeah,
I think I was putting this out there a while ago. They should have just partnered with Clubhouse, because
yeah,
Clubhouse is trying to go for community, but community is built into X. So they lost that. Like
yeah.
community is natively built into X. Where you have
Mhm.
money Twitter, or Web3 Twitter, baseball Twitter, comedy Twitter. Like that's how it is. So just pivot, bro. Like you're making no money, you have no community. Just build an audio dating app. Just partner with fucking Netflix and just go. Like, but they're blind, I guess.
Some
Ironically,
fine. Somebody from Clubhouse stumble upon my little couple hundred subscriber channel listen to this conversation, and go make your next $100 million. You're welcome, Greg Lunt.
Clubhouse is completely incompetent. I have no faith in
Yeah,
them.
I know. I don't either. They really talk about dropping the ball in every way imaginable. Okay, man. How much time do you have, dude? I think we're already over an hour.
I have as much time as you want, bro. I'm really enjoying
Okay.
this.
All right on, bro. I'm very happy to hear that. Then we're gonna run through our usual LSB Laughing Stoic Buddha questions. Very interested to hear your thoughts. We've touched on this a little bit throughout, but I'm gonna give you some of the proper prompts here. So starting with the Stoics, I want you to imagine that you're on your deathbed. We'll be generous. We'll say you're 105. You lived a long, healthy um, life, and you're looking back over your life. What kind of a life would you be proud that you had lived? Would you have considered a meaningful, good life?
I've provided and helped a lot of people. Provided for and helped a lot of people. Like, there's no question. It's like if I'm laying there by myself, like that's the extreme, right? The other extreme is like there's no one even around you that cares. And I know that's not going to be the case. I already know that. But then like the next level of that on the negative side would be you have like a couple people around you and you're just thinking about like what have I done? Like what how have I impacted? Like what is my legacy? And it's less about legacy because there's something like egotistical about that where it's like how will people remember me? It's not even about me,
Mhm.
but it's just about like did I make a wave? Like are people's lives different because I was there? Like the butterfly effect at it the most extreme. Like did it matter that I was on earth? Because there are people, of course there's little things they go here, they go there. It would have changed things. But they're nobody, you know, it's just the reality. It's like they never helped anybody. They never outside of their like maybe immediate circle. And I don't necessarily want to be Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. I think there's trade-offs. We all have our own choices. I believe that I guess it's a little off topic, but I do believe that there is this universal pull towards whatever the mathematical flow of the universe and of evolution and of time just unfolds at its own pace, and there's nothing really we can do to disrupt that. But I do think that we have freedom of choice and expression within that larger structure. And I want to make choices that impact a lot of people in that environment.
Mm.
And I want to feel like my life was worth something, you know, and I think that's the best way to do it is to feel like other people were impacted by the things that you created and the messages that you spread.
I love that answer. I relate to it a lot. I often think that it's kind of cliche, but life is a gift. And because it's a gift, you have a responsibility to return something with the
Mm,
time that you are given.
mm.
And I felt that in your answer is you feel a responsibility to not just be sucking air and holding up space in the 100 years or however much time you have here, but to make a difference in other people's lives and to leave some sort of an impact that outlives you.
You're also making me think, I've never really thought of it like this, but I do believe in this human experience. I know the way that I've behaved, particularly in the last couple of years, has been one where I just pretty much give everything I can. I'm like, will this what can I pour into that like is aligned with my skills that I think will like entertain or help people? And I don't necessarily do it just out of pure selflessness. I'm not an angel, but I don't do it for the direct transactional return. I do it because I know that the more I pour into space, the more I pour into the universe, the more I create, the more I help people, the more will come back to me. There's this like universal law of reciprocity, right? Or this
Yeah.
karmic balance. And so, to your point, when you're laying on your deathbed, instead of like, oh, I created a lot of stuff, and so money came back to me in like in the micro. There's like this macro, like life. Like, did I do a lot in my life that in the afterlife or whatever, like you are rewarded in some sense. And that's not exactly how I'm trying to say it, but like I think the opposite would be true. Whereas if I laid there and I was like, you didn't do anything with this gift you were given of life, I would feel like I'm in for it somehow. Like I have, not that I'm going to hell, but that I'm
Yeah.
like, I might have to do this again, or that like I would wonder like what's next for me because I wasted this
Mhm.
versus like just people they're happy and they smile and they close their eyes and they're done because they know that they gave everything that they had, and then I think that ends up in some sort of peaceful continuation.
I agree, dude. I mean, this is Buddhism, and they talk about spiritual. All spiritual practice is preparation for a good death, and they do believe in reincarnation. I don't even think you have to believe in reincarnation for that still to be true. If you start with the North Star of, if I'm going out, just to your point, if I'm going out thinking, fuck, I did not do my best. I had these gifts and I didn't share them. I let fear or selfishness take me over, when if I could have overcome those, I could have had a better impact, and I could have showed up for people and done better work and been more loving. And to die with that regret, that's my pin post is, um, when I was looking down the barrel of a gun, when I was getting jumped and I was having a near death experience, I actually felt at peace. And my little hook in there is, if you don't want to die, if you don't want your final moments to be full of regret, read this. And I really mean that, because I faced what I thought was my final moment. I was looking at a gun and the guy was telling me he was going to shoot me, and I actually felt at peace. And it's fucking crazy because I couldn't know that without running the experiment, right? And so I try to purposefully run that experiment all the time, like theoretically, and to think that I'm going to die in this moment and to feel any regret, like I didn't give it my best. Who cares about the next life or hell or anything like that? That fucking moment sucks. And I don't want to end up there. I want to end up feeling at peace. And the only way to do that is to live the best life possible now.
Mm-hmm. I'm with
Yeah.
you.
Right on, man. Okay, so that's a solid answer for the Stoic side of things. We're gonna do a little transitional question to the Buddhist side. I haven't asked this question in a while, actually, but I want to hear your answer on it. This is something I used to do in the earlier episodes. The idea of the matrix, okay, and this is different for everybody else. I have a pretty nuanced idea of what I consider to be the matrix, but we'll call it the status quo, sort of the illusion that the majority of people seem to be under, of what reality is, what life is, what it means to be a human being. I have a feeling that at some point in your life, you saw through that matrix. You saw through the illusion that was presented to you by your parents or school or media or whatever, and you saw that there was a deeper reality below that matrix. If you've had an experience like that, can you remember the biggest time in your life you felt like you saw through the matrix?
Yes. So there are two different ways to think about the matrix in that sense, the way you've outlined it, where you have the one which is like the mass media woke mind virus, like just everyone's a sheep, they just do what they're told matrix, and it's like, oh, I like understand what's going on a, I'm not offended by the word conspiracy. I'm more of an open-minded person and all that, and that's great. And then there's another, the way you described it, which actually hits deeper for me, is kind of like there's a different way to like live life and a different way to like approach the present moment than through the material and through the surface level. And that really is my discovery of Eckhart Tolle in probably 2013. So it's probably been a little over 10 years, maybe 2014, I can't remember. And I read The Power of Now and I read A New Earth, and I was completely obsessed to the point that I just watched hundreds of hours, I must have been, of his video content. I remember watching at work, I would watch, um, he did a long series with Oprah,
Mhm.
where they went through A New Earth chapter by chapter, and they took calls from all around the world live.
Yeah.
And I remember watching all 8 or 12, whatever hours of that every day for a couple weeks. Um, and I would talk to my friends about it. I would talk to my girlfriend at the time about it. And this was a little bit before it became normal to post about the present moment and all like that. That wasn't like a thing, at least at the millennial random person level. Where now it's like everyone's kind of familiar with that concept. Obviously, that's been around for thousands of years, is to tap into that ever since, basically religion or prior to that. But now everyone kind of knows about it because information is so widespread. You've obviously come across it. But I was like, it was so mind blowing to me that I was not my thoughts.
Yeah.
That there was a gap between me and the things I was thinking. And when Eckhart describes his come to awareness moment, let's say, was basically him lying in bed, depressed, borderline suicidal, saying, I cannot live with myself any longer. I cannot live with myself any longer. And in retrospect, realizing that there was an I and there was a myself,
Mhm.
that there were two different entities at play, where one is the ego and one is the pure consciousness that is watching the ego, where the thoughts and the emotions all stem from. And that because there is that divide, that natural separation, and that all of us are those two entities at once in any given moment, you can tap into the deeper version in the present, which is all we ever have, because all the things that we've gone through in the past, where our guilt comes from, where our anger comes from, where our sadness comes from, those are all things you experienced now. And all the things that you're worried about, that you're stressed about, that you're anxious about, that you're fearful of in the future that haven't happened yet, those will all happen now. And so the more you can root yourself in the now, the more you'll be able to not hold that guilt over yourself and not worry about the things. You can take the lessons and you can learn, and there's practicality in that, but you don't have to identify with that because it's gone. It's not now. And you don't have to worry about those things, because the more you're rooted here, the more you'll act in accordance with what you need to be doing when those things eventually come from the future. And there's a real disidentification with thoughts that need to happen. And that's partly, people experience that in meditation, is kind of the idea of like, watch your thoughts. That is a way to do it. And but the real power is being able to do that throughout your day. And when you're washing your hands, like a real powerful thing is like not labeling things, right? Because when you
Mhm.
look at a box of tissues and you're like, oh, tissues, light, laptop, bed, that's what our brains do automatically. But if
Mhm.
you just experience things from a sensory perception level, Eckhart talks about how there is the only way, like, think about the room that you're in. What's the biggest thing in the room you're in? Oh, my bed, this thing behind me, my desk is pretty big, my closet. No, it's the space.
Space.
The only way that all this stuff can even be here is because it lives in the space. Same with sound. There's space, there's silence. The sound can only come out of silence. The silence is the baseline. So there's this baseline of like these sensory perceptions that we can tap into through intentional consciousness, through breath work, through just taking a moment to not label everything and tell yourself a little story about every single thing that you see, hear, think, feel, and taste, and just experience it on the sensory level and bring you present. So, all of that type of stuff, there's other elements to his teachings, of course. And all of that was just like, I was in literally just a cloud my whole life. I had zero self awareness. I was purely acting out of how I felt. And everything that came up inside me was me. in terms of my behavior and my identification, and to start to begin to understand that I was in control of those and I could watch those and I could make decisions on how to act and notice that you're feeling angry. It doesn't just go, oh, I'm angry now. And now I behave out of anger. And I could make that choice. That changed everything for me, man.
Dude, I love that the Matrix question prompted that answer for you because it shows me where you're at. A lot of people think of the Matrix as still, like you said, I'm too intelligent to fall for the woke stuff, or I believe in certain conspiracy theories, but I don't fall for everything. I sort of have this independent thinking mindset, right? And that's cool. That's sort of breaking through one level of the matrix. But there's another matrix illusion, which is your whole idea of who you are, that you believe your every single thought that pops into your head. So there's a layer of matrix there that most people never are able to see and break through. And because of the work of people like Eckhart Tolle and all sorts of other spiritual teachers, luckily, people are awakening to that like most baseline matrix of being completely wrapped up in your emotional reactions, your thoughts, your patterns, your conditioning, and all that. And that leap, that very small but huge leap of being able to observe those thoughts, those reactions, those feelings, and see them as other than you. You're not the thoughts themselves, but you're that which is aware of them. And then that doesn't mean that you stop thinking forever. It's impossible. But you can start to think more intentionally in a way that serves you better and serves your purpose and the people around you better. And that whole spiel you just went on, I got to clip that whole thing, was really beautiful, dude. You're really right on it. And I just wanted to, I don't know how many of my episodes you've watched, but there's a drinking game. Whenever I bring up my spiritual teacher, Paul Hederman, you take a shot of whiskey because I bring him up every episode. Something that Paul is sort of like Eckhart Tolle, but like a weird rebel rock star version. He talks about all the same stuff. He was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and he found spirituality and recovery and has been sober for 35 years. Something he'll often say is, everyone's talking about how to get into the moment, these practices that they have to get into the moment. And I always say everyone has it ass backwards. You are under the illusion you can be out of a moment. That's exactly what you were talking about.
Mm.
That the whole idea of, oh, I'm totally lost in the future. No, you're not. You're in this moment, but you're wrapped up and identified so much with your thoughts about the future. You think you're actually there. You can't be there. You can only ever be here and now. And that was a huge shift for me. I spent my whole life after hearing about Eckhart Tolle and mindfulness and stuff like that of, man, I'm out of the moment 90% of the time. And every now and then I meditate, I do breath work, I go for a walk, and then, oh, thank God I'm back into the moment. And my teacher, his brand is Zen Bitch Slap. He gives a lot of like one-off bitch slaps that just sort of wake you up. And one of his bitch slaps is, you can't be out of a moment. You're always here and now. In fact, you are inseparable from the moment itself. No moment, no us. We are that which is aware in this moment. And you can fall into the illusion or the belief
Or
that
the
you're
Matrix.
the matrix of, I'm lost in these regrets of the past. I have anxiety about these things of the future. But if you're honest with yourself, you're only ever that which is aware of those thoughts here and now in
Mm-hmm.
this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Really
Well
loved your
said.
answer, man. Right on. Okay, we're gonna go to the absolute highest spiritual level of this podcast. I'm asking you the biggest question imaginable here. Yeah, I always ask it a different way every time. Sometimes I call it the God question. Sometimes I call it the ultimate reality question. But I'm gonna keep it simple. What is this that we're inside of? What is reality? What's going on?
I thought you were just going to literally ask, what is this? And I was like, that's deep. Because I have no
I
idea what
should
you're
have
talking
stopped
about.
there.
um, well, I touched on it a little bit, a couple of times throughout this in terms of my very primitive, even for a human understanding, which is um, what I'm optimizing for. And that I believe there is a universal mathematical equation that's playing out, that we have freedom of choice and within. So I don't believe like every human has like a predetermined outcome per se. Um, Although perhaps the universal force is so strong that maybe we do. I'm unclear on that, but I like at this point I like to think that I get to make choices within the rule set of physics and 3D reality, as well as the universal mathematical unfolding of time and how that manifests in the physical world around me. And within those structures, I get to play my own game. And when I go too far to the outskirts, you get shocked, and it tries to bring you back to maybe what is a destiny. I don't know. Um, but I do get to choose how far on the outskirts of this experience I get to play. Um, and there's risk and reward and choices involved. And even if choice is not real, the illusion of choice, as far as we're concerned, is choice. So who cares if it's deterministic or not, because it feels like choice. So is there really even a difference between choice and feeling like you had a choice? Because it's still the same experience, right? For the
Yes.
individual to feel like they had it, they might as well have just had it, because to them they did. So what's going on? None of us know what we're doing. Things are speeding up rapidly in that universal vortex. We're coming to, I mean, we may still be in a very wide point, but it's things are getting tighter. So
Mhm.
where someone used to be able to make a 10 or 20-year plan, that's no longer the case. You can hardly make a 10 or 20-month plan.
Yeah.
Truly, it's impossible. Maybe you can make a 10 or 20-week plan, but that's probably about the most you can do at this point with any sort of certainty. And so all I know is that I'm optimizing for what I deem to be the most enjoyable experience for me as an individual, with the goals that I have around freedom and family and helping others, and just trying to realize that this is just a game that we have an opportunity to play, and the rules are can be bent but not broken, and there are new objectives and new adversaries and new energies always entering and leaving the picture, and trying not to be too serious about, did I make enough money this month, and making it more about like, am I doing things that are enjoyable and sustainable so that I can have the best experience possible. And I actually don't spend a lot of time thinking about what is this. It's more of a acceptance that it is,
Mhm.
and then that's about it. And then I just operate within that it is.
Wow, man, I love everything about your answer. I vibe with it a lot. I was thinking throughout that it's sort of like a single player video game, that there's
100%.
code and rules within the video game. I love your analogy of pushing the edge and sort of finding that edge, right? And the courage that it takes. And the game itself might sort of shock you and send you back on course, but you wouldn't know if you didn't have the courage to try. And that's something I've heard throughout your life stories. You have pushed the edge several times, and continued along in the single player game. And I really am vibing a lot. Like, I feel like this is something that's I'm going to leave with from this conversation, is optimizing for experience. I think if you pick one North Star sort of to guide your life by, and this, again, this is something I really personally philosophize about a lot either. What is this? I sort of think it's a helpful question to get down to those sort of core things that are directing your life. And I love that you keep coming back to, I want to have the best experience possible. That's what a human incarnation is we get to experience things. And that doesn't mean it's like, all pleasure or all comfort. It also means struggle and even suffering and disappointment. But enjoying every nuance and everything on the whole spectrum of what it means to have a human experience. And I think it's a really good North Star to keep in mind as you travel through this video game.
Mm. And then there's like sub North Stars that can continually change, right? So I
Side
right now I
quests, yeah.
yeah, but it's not it's even less of a side quest and more of a building block, right? Where it's
Mm,
not like off on the side, it's part of the larger North Star. So if all of our North Star is experience, whether we realize it or not, it is.
mhm.
Whether we want to have love, we want to have money, we want to have peace, we want to, it's all based on a better experience for
Yes,
the individual. That's all we care
yes.
about, is to be happy and peaceful and blah, blah, blah experience. So
Mhm.
if we all have that North Star, then you can have a multitude of sub North Stars that are ever changing in importance, right? So
Mm.
like right now I'm talking about finding a wife,
Yeah.
whereas 3 years ago that wasn't important to me. And once I have a wife, that won't be no longer be a North Star for me. But
Mm.
you try like a video game, as you say, you have these like different levels of the character that you get to build based on the amount of resources that you've accumulated, let's say, that you can direct towards agility, speed, power in a football game, you can put towards health, money, family, well, like whatever you pouring into at that season of your life.
Yeah.
So
Great
you have these
analogy.
like these sub North Stars within the experiential North Star, which is really all of our North Star, whether we know it or not.
Beautifully, beautifully put, dude. Love it. Hey, you've been very gracious with your time. I appreciate it, man. We went some really cool, deep places. We're gonna finish with my favorite question, always to ask. It's the first word in the name, laughing, Stoic Buddha. Can you tell me about the last time or the first time that comes to mind that you laughed really, really fucking hard? You're crying, your abs hurt. Uh, what comes to mind?
The first one that comes to mind, funnily enough, is when we started the Louder Telegram, and there were 1,000 journeyman memes in like a 24-hour period. And I actually am not exaggerating that number. Um, and we were in the Telegram. Oh, we were in a space, all of us, and in the Telegram at the same time, memeing the fuck out of one dude who has been on your podcast. And you
Yes,
guys
a
should check
friend.
out that episode. And that just came to me as the last time that I just belly laughed for like hours. And I've actually had some of my best laughing releases and sessions in small late night pop-up spaces with you and with others in our community. Um, it's really been a joyous opportunity, as we talk about things like we have today. I say them and I'm like, I want to tweet that. I want to share that. And then I realize it's going to be so hard to capture that in a tweet. It's going
Yeah,
to be so hard to make people feel what I just felt and what you just felt. But when we get into a space where we can speak, all of a sudden, now you can make those connections and share those experiences at such a deeper level. And the laughing that we've done in those spaces is part of that, and a version of that that I've really enjoyed.
bro. The last time that I laughed to tears was you and Tommy going back and forward on one of those late night spaces a couple nights ago. I was on mute, but I was crying. You guys are so fucking funny together. I don't know if everyone else in the space was laughing, but you just perfectly fit my humor in such a great way. You guys are fucking yeah. I work construction. You guys are like two construction guys just fucking ragging on each other, and
Yeah.
it's one of the joys of my life is to jump on a Greg space and listen to you talk shit to Tommy or Journeyman or me. So
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, man. That's my sense of humor, is just kind of shit on my friends, I guess.
that's it, bro. It's right up my alley. All right, man. Let's finish with this. Where can people find you, follow you, and see what you're working on?
Yeah. X is going to be the best spot. So go to X at Greg Lunt X on X, and everything will be there. My DMs are open. You can always go to the Telegram too. That's the link in my bio on X. So everything's right there.
Join the Telegram, join the newsletter, and Greg, appreciate the hell out of you, man. This was a lot of fun, and this was a very meaningful conversation for me.
Thank you, brother. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this conversation, please hit the like button. If you want to watch more podcasts like this in the future, subscribe and hit the notification to be notified when they come up. If you want to keep up with me, I am on Twitter now every day at write with a W already. Link to that will be in the description. If you want to check out my writing, I publish a newsletter every Friday through Substack. Link to that will also be in the description. I love you guys, and let's keep doing this together. Peace.